Hey everybody, and welcome to Bits of Board, where we're talking board games, miniatures, cards and dice. My name's Michael, and today we're checking out a game by the name of Machina Arcana, a horror steampunk adventure game where players cooperatively take on the forces of Lovecraftian evil as they explore the depths of an ancient subterranean complex. Games are story-driven, and cards and materials are filled to the brim with flavor text meant to transform the game experience into something more narratively rich. The copy that we will be playing today is the premium edition from the A Dreamer Games Kickstarter. Content-wise, I think we've got 2 additional scenarios to play, but other than that, the content should be about the same as the base game. This is a 2nd edition, so there's likely some errata. If you're playing the 1st edition, there may be a few changes scattered about. In this vid, I'm going to run through a few key elements of gameplay. Then we're actually going to play a couple of rounds of a real game. After that, we'll come back here and I'll give you a rundown on my initial thoughts of playing through, but we're likely going to see a continuation of the playthrough, picking up where we finish off here. So, without further ado, let's get stuck in and see what it's like. Machina Arcana is a cooperative dungeon crawl on its surface, but underneath the map tiles, item decks, monsters and dice rolling, we have a game so full of theme and adventure, it's just not right to lump it in with the rest. The game has a basic AI controlling how monsters react to players and objective-driven scenarios that will guide players through its story. Full games can last 2 to 3 hours, but there are ways to shorten them up. But you do miss out on the full reaches of narrative. Before playing, players should decide on which scenario they would like to experience, with the 1st edition of the game coming with 3 different scenarios, and the most recent edition a grand total of 5, thanks of course to its Kickstarter success. Now, unlike most of the scenario-driven games out there, lack of replayability is not an issue here, thanks to a universal set of map tiles used across the game. With these, players can experience the throes of any scenario without being locked into a fixed map progression, meaning objectives will be differently located on each play, and the players would have to explore completely new combinations of areas to fulfill their goals. Amongst a number of other things, map tiles contain event spaces, chests, traps and pits, and spawning locations for the monsters that inhabit the game. Machina Arcana is structured into 4 phases of gameplay. The first is the Explorers phase. Here our players will activate their explorers, moving them around the map, interacting with points of interest, and all in all, working towards completing their scenario objectives. Players can activate in any order and should do so in a way that best suits their needs. Next, we have 2 phases designed to surprise our explorers. 2 phases that will ultimately test their preparedness and spring the traps and the horrors of the game's Lovecraftian setting. First, the spawn phase, where monsters will appear on the map. This phase is resolved with a dice roll, with spawning chances set by the given stage of the scenario. Different monsters are grouped into different levels of difficulty, with stronger monsters appearing as the scenario progresses. Next, the horror phase, where again we roll the dice to see if a new horror event comes into play. These events have varying effects on gameplay, but will often provide existing monsters with new ways with which they can activate. Finally, we have the monster phase, where in spawning order, monsters will each activate, moving towards and attempting to attack the nearest explorer. These 4 phases repeat until the game is won or all players are defeated. Defeat is most often caused in combat where a player's life is reduced to 0. Yes, there is player elimination in this game, but defeated players will actually be given control of the monsters on the board, fighting against the remaining explorers to draw the game to a real close. Units, whether monsters or explorers, share a number of attributes that determine combat results and actions taken. Health represents the amount of damage a unit can take before it is defeated. Preventing damage, we have 2 attributes: armor, representing defense against physical attacks, and will, representing defense against arcane attacks. Then we have stamina, representing the cost of an action or cost of abilities a unit has gained. Once a unit or player reaches 0 stamina, or they no longer wish to spend it, their activation is over. Stamina is spent in a number of different ways. Movement cost is 1 point per space moved. Attacks, well, they vary on the weapon.
And then there's the activation of map points of interest. You'll see all this in play pretty soon, so there's no real need to go through it in detail just yet. Now, explorers also have a fifth attribute not shared by the monsters. That is essence. The explorer's essence stat represents the maximum amount of the resource that they can have, but unlike all other attributes, they actually start a scenario with 0. Explorers will gain essence in a number of ways, from defeating monsters to activating event spaces, and will spend it to prevent damage to their health, augment their attacks, or in best cases, actually progressing through the scenario. Now, before we move into a bit of gameplay, let's quickly see some combat in action. Let's have our explorer Hank up against this Yedithian. Let's say Hank had the wonderful brass umbrella. He would be able to use this weapon to attack by spending 2 points of his stamina. The attack is a melee attack as there's no number in the targeting symbol, and for this attack he would be able to roll 1 black dice. The Yedithian's defense in case of a physical attack is 2 as he has 2 armor, so we're going to need to roll a 2 or more. Sounds easy, but these dice actually range only from 0 to 3, and that's just the black dice. The white dice are only 0 to 2. So we roll, and we score a 1, which, unaltered, is not enough to give us the hit. But good news is we're attacking with Hank, and he has a special ability allowing us to increase our weapon's melee attack rolls by 1. That 1 becomes a 2, that 2 is equal to the Yedithian's armor, we score ourselves a hit. Now, no matter what the weapon, hits only ever cause 1 point of damage. Here we can see the Yedithian only has 1 point of health, so in flipping that over, we defeat him, gaining 1 essence for our troubles. Machina Arcana has a really generous loot system. Basically, whenever a player gains loot, they're able to choose from which of the 4 item decks they draw. We have weapons, apparel, artifacts, and consumables. Kind of standard stuff there, but this is kind of where the game sets itself apart because, drawing 1 item from a deck, there is a lot of luck in that. Here, pretty much whenever a player gains an item card, they will be using the draw X and keep 1 method. Let's say Hank cracks open a chest on the map, he'll draw 2 items from 1 or more decks, evaluate them, and keep 1. Then the remaining card can either be returned to the top of the deck from whence it came, or it can be destroyed and placed in the discard pile. This draw method opens up 2 wonderful options. It's no longer just the luck of the draw. Players can either diversify with item options from any of the decks that they desire, or they can concentrate and mill through a single deck, quickly destroying any cards not useful to them and the group. Weapon cards can contain either melee or long-ranged weapons, or upgrades to increase their effectiveness. The upgrade and crafting system in this game allows players to load out with multiple weapons equipped, so long as they're compatible. Here we can see the Jagged Karambit and the Rogue Rifle are able to be equipped together because they have compatible upgrade slots. Here we can also see the Rogue Rifle can be augmented so long as its upgrade shares the same symbol. Here we can see that stabilizing cogs would not be a suitable upgrade as they have different symbols, but the hunting scope would work out. Apparel works in a similar way. We have pieces for the head, torso, and legs, as well as upgrades for any torso pieces. The easiest way to distinguish different pieces of apparel is that head pieces have an upgrade slot on the bottom of their card, leg pieces have an upgrade spot on the top of their card, with torso pieces being the only piece having an augment slot pointing to the right. Here it's worth noting that an explorer can only ever have 1 piece of each type of apparel equipped at any time. And yes, that means you can't double up on the torso piece. Whatever piece of apparel equipped though, the explorer is going to gain bonus abilities and extra points for their attributes. Here, the burst mail increases the explorer's armor and will by 1 point each. Artifacts can also be equipped, granting additional abilities to the explorer, as well as also increasing the will attribute. Consumables are very powerful one-shot abilities that are destroyed and discarded after use. These, unlike all the other item cards, do not need to be equipped before they can be used. Just like the monsters in-game, items are also separated into level, and the ones you find will gain more and more powerful as the game progressed. Here you've just seen a couple of the level 1 options, but in the game we have items all the way up to level 3, with new items being added to the active deck as the scenario dictates. Anyway, here I am all set up to play the scenario Horror in the Ice. I'm controlling 2 explorers, Kim Richards, our gunner, and Hank Horden, our bruiser, and we've randomly drawn this map tile to start us off. Over in the middle of our playing area here we have the chapter board, which contains all the scenario cards outlining our objectives and a few tracks representing key game features. We have the current monster level, determining which monster cards are present in the monster deck, the monster threat track, which represents the progress towards the next monster level, the spawn rating, representing the likelihood of monsters spawning, and the horror track, representing the likelihood of a new horror event taking place. Basically, the lower these numbers, the higher chance that these events will take place. Now, their initial values are set by the scenario, so let's go ahead and flip over our next scenario card, the entrance. Here you can see we're in chapter 1 and we have some story text to read should we want to get into it, which I'm sure we will, but we also have our values to set for the 2 tracks either side the board here. So the spawning track we are going to set all the way up at 7, and our horror track all the way down a little bit at 4. Here we have our player boards, each containing an explorer card and their own attribute tracks. The card contains the explorer's own specific abilities, their attributes with the current levels being displayed on the tracks, and also their class, which needs to be remembered when resolving some actions. Each board also houses explorer markers, which help players track their explorer's lasting effects. It's worth noting that the monsters also have counters to keep track of their own effects. Alright, so we're out of the tour, let's get into some gameplay, and I just noticed something kinda cool. I've swapped around the 2 decks here because I am almost 100% that the artwork from the previous card is a visualization of the story going on in this particular chapter. So right here, we have the entrance. Hey presto, here is our entrance. I love it. And it means that as we move on, we are going to get more visualizations of the world forming around us. I'm so excited. Let's get playing. We begin our Horror in the Ice playthrough in chapter 1, the entrance.
As we stepped into the dark, an uncanny gust of wind followed us in and continued on down through the wide and spacious halls, echoing incessantly. Our eyes, still blinking from the polar glare, adapted at last as we could finally make out our surroundings. There was scant light, yet enough for us to discover ancient and complex corridors, halls, and rooms built by unknown hands eons ago. What craft erected those delicate walls and exquisite pillars that rose above the precisely detailed flooring of stone slabs beneath our feet? The whole space seemed to pulsate with a strange rhythm, faint and indistinct. As we embarked on our exploration of these subterranean ruins, the feeling of disquiet only continued to grow. The further we ventured in, the more it appeared that in some bizarre way, the place itself became aware of our presence, and we seemed to be alone no longer.
Alright, so we are in. After getting a good feel about what this chapter is going to be about, we go ahead and resolve any on-entry instructions that we've been given. So in this case here, we're instructed to place the entry token on the map. And we're going to place our entry token just on top of the entry marker here. From here, we're going to place our explorers on or adjacent to the entry tile. So our explorers are set up, our spawn and horror tracks are ready to go. Let's begin our very first explorer phase. Now, before we begin, it's probably worth talking about what our current objective here is for the first chapter, because as you saw, there are no real objectives in the instructions for the scenario. Basically, to resolve this card, we're going to need to activate a chapter space on the map, and lucky for us, there is one bang smack in the middle of the map here. But unfortunately for us, The cost for activating these things is quite high. Firstly, we'd have to spend 3 points of our stamina, which is fine. Both our explorers have 6 at the moment, but we would also need to spend 3 essence, which we currently have none of. So we need to get exploring, we need to start defeating some of the monsters that are going to start spawning, and then once we're ready to go, we're going to head to that chapter space. Now it is worth noting that the chapter space has a number of different states. Right here, we have its unlit space. This is the default state for any chapter space. It can also be lit. This can occur after we seal a spawning location, but that too requires essence, so good luck doing that too early. And then after the chapter space is lit, it becomes explored and it can't be used again. So, that said, let's get moving. We're going to begin with our explorer, Kim, on the left-hand side here, and we're going to try and get to one of the event spaces floating around in the corner of the map. She's currently got 6 points of stamina, so let's spend some to move. Now movement can be both diagonal and orthogonal, so we're going to make it to our desired location by spending 3 points of stamina. We're going to go 1, 2, 3. Now you'll note that Kim moved through a door, and that is okay. All doors in the game start open as default, but these can be closed to impede monster movement. 3 points of stamina down, 3 to go. Now in this location, Kim is adjacent to 3 different map types. The recharge station can be activated, and the explorer would roll the recharge dice, and this could grant points of stamina in return or points of health. In the top left here, we have an event space which can be activated for 3 points of stamina, and in doing so we would be able to resolve an explorer event, which could be very useful for all of our explorers. Not only that though, this is one of the main ways that we can gain essence. The final space in the top right there is a workbench. These can be activated by explorers for 3 stamina, allowing them to draw 3 top cards from any of the item decks. It's the standard pick 3, keep 1 thing, but the cool thing is you get a free inventory action after activating. Look, it's early days, so I'm thinking we're going to spend our 3 points of stamina activating an event space. We'll go ahead, cover that up with an explored token, spend our last 3 points of stamina, and we'll resolve our event. While we're here though, we'll take off with that extra 1 point of essence. We'll draw from the top of the Explorer deck, and what do we get? Breeze of Fortune. So the Breeze of Fortune card grants all of our explorers an ability. They can spend 3 points of stamina to increase armor by 2 points for the entirety of this round. Very, very cool indeed. On to Hank's activation. Now we could do something similar, run up to the top corner here, get another one of those event spaces out of the way, but very soon it's going to be time to spawn monsters, so I think we need to be a little bit more prepared than we are. So, let's begin by moving, spending 3 points, 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to activate one of these chest locations. This costs us 3 points of stamina. We cover it up with an explored token, and now we get to draw 2 cards from any of the item decks. Here I'm thinking weapons. 1 and 2. We have the Jagged Karambit. It's a fairly weak weapon, but it only costs 1 point of stamina to use. And we have the Stabilizing Cogs, which can be used to augment some weapons to increase their attack rolls. I'm thinking we're going to take the Jagged Karambit, and we're going to burn the Stabilizing Cogs, destroying the card and discarding. Now, depending on the explorer's class, we're sometimes able to equip the newly gained item immediately. Otherwise, we would need to perform an inventory action costing 3 points of stamina just on its own. Thankfully for us, the Bruiser class is able to immediately equip weapons, so we're going to go ahead and do that right now. And there, with both of our explorers activated, we move into the next phase of the game, the spawn phase. Here, we have to roll the game dice once for each of our explorers. If we roll equal to or higher, we're essentially going to spawn a new monster, and if we roll less, we'll skip that, but adjust the spawn rating so that it's easier for a monster to spawn next round. We'll roll, and we have a 3, which is underneath. No monster spawns, so we reduce the tracker. Next, we roll for Hank, Another D10 roll, and we get a 2 here. Again, the value is not high enough, so we reduce the track. The spawn phase is over. No new monsters just yet. We move to our next track, the horror track. Here we just roll once, and the same results occur. If we roll equal to or greater than the current listed horror value, we're going to resolve a horror event. If it's less, we're going to drop that tracker down by 1. 3, it is less, my goodness. So this is a fairly uneventful turn of events. We move now into the monster phase, but guys and gals, we have no monsters on the map, so we are safe just for the moment. We head back around to the very beginning of the game's structure, and we are going to activate our explorers. Kim will begin by activating the workbench, and I think we're going to go the weapons, even though we would not normally be able to equip them immediately. But if you remember, workbench actions allow a free inventory action on completion. 3 red, 1, 2, 3. And now we can see what we get out of it. Alright, so we've done pretty well here. We've scored a rogue rifle, which for 3 stamina we can shoot at range 4. And we're going to be rolling 3 of the most powerful attack dice. It does also have a bonus effect. Whenever we kill, we can look at the top 2 cards of one item deck and reorder them. And it can be upgraded and we can equip other cool stuff. I'm thinking this is definitely a great looking weapon. Oh, we do have a melee weapon here, the bouncing hurlbat. Look, this might be really good for Hank, so we might not keep it, but we might put it back on top of the deck. And then what do we have? The hunting scope increases the weapon range by 1. Well, we're definitely going to take the rogue rifle. That is a great weapon to start with. But what about these other 2? Look, the gun can already shoot at a range of 4. I'm not sure we're going to need that weapon's range just yet, so we might burn this one. But that bouncing hurlbat, that would definitely help with those melee attacks for Hank. Let's go ahead and we'll put this one back on top of the deck, and we'll go ahead and burn the other. Now, there are 2 main differences between the workbench action and the chest action. The first is that you get to draw an extra card when activating a workbench, which is amazing. But the second bonus is also as good. Here and now we can take a free inventory action to equip our newly gained items. So that rogue rifle, heck yes. We'll equip our rogue rifle, and let's get back into that main corridor over to the side here. So we'll spend our last 3 points of stamina. 1, 2, 3. We are ready for trouble. Hank's gonna get into things as well. We'll begin by spending 3 points of stamina to open another chest. And here we're going to take the top weapon card, but also the top apparel card. We know exactly what that weapon card is going to be. Thanks to Kim's action before, we definitely want it, but we also want to start milling through the other decks here. So we have the bouncing hurlbat. We'll definitely be taking that one. But what are we picking up in the apparel side of things? Shredders. These are worn on the legs, and for 4 points of stamina, we can remove adjacent destroyed door tokens. Look, I don't feel like that's going to be of much use to us at all, so we'll go ahead and burn that one into the discard pile, and we'll take the bouncing heart, equipping that instead of our jagged karambit. Now, there are 2 points on the map that we should be pretty aware of right now. We have a monster spawn point up here and a monster spawn point down here. Chances are we're going to see some monsters this spawn phase, so we want to be in a place where we can either deal with them or get away from them nice and quick. Look, while loot is exciting, I really think we need to concentrate on the essence side of things. So I'm going to go ahead with our final points of stamina for Hank, move down the bridgeway here, working our way into the bottom right corner. We'll go 1, 2, 3. Now this is a good start for the moment, but I want all of our explorers off these grated map tiles because these are actually trap tiles. Now, while they don't do anything until they're activated by the trap lever, there's one up there, I'm certainly not going to want to activate them while we have explorers standing on them. So, we're almost off the track. That's good. We're almost at another event space for us. Time for our spawn phase. We'll begin by rolling for Kim, and we roll a 6. Guys and gals, we are spawning our first monster. We begin by drawing a monster from the level 1 deck here, and it's that pesky Eudithian that we saw from the example. We head over to the map, and we're going to spawn this creature on the closest spawning location to the character who rolled. So the Eudithian is going to spawn just up top here, and we might be in for a fairly exciting monster round. After a monster is spawned, we reset the spawning marker to its original state, and now we're going to go ahead and roll the Hank. An 8. Oof, that's higher. We get a second monster spawned. We grab our deck and we draw, and we have a Thrall. This is going to be a fairly interesting monster to come up against because it doesn't actually want to attack. It just invokes horror events, which can be devastating if left unchecked. We spawn the Thrall next to Hank, and we're off to the horror phase. Rolling the dice here, we get a 9. This means we experience our very first horror event. We draw the top card, and we have Mending Slumber. Now, this is a scenario-specific horror event. We do shuffle in a couple of extra cards to the base event just to give this particular scenario its own bit of flavor, which is definitely a nice touch. Down the bottom here, though, we have our ongoing effects. On the start of a wounded monster's turn, it restores 1 health and loses 3 stamina. So the monsters are going to be healing. Oof. We place the horror event down, and this will be in play as long as it hasn't been replaced. The final step after a successful horror check is to move the monster threat value up a notch. There are 10 spaces here, and once the marker hits the 10th space, the monster level goes up. And of course, after a successful horror event, we return it to its default value. Alright, with the horror event over, we are into the monster phase, and guys and girls, there are actually monsters here to do some damage. We begin by activating the Eudithian because it was the first to be summoned. Now, monsters will generally want to move in close to an explorer to attack, melee attacks and all, but here the Eudithian has a ranged arcane attack. At range 3, guys and gals, Kim is in range immediately. The Eudithian is going to attack. We spend 2 of its 5 points of stamina, and we're going to do an arcane attack, rolling 3 white dice. Kim's will is only 2, so this is going to be a tricky one to deflect. Oh, we roll a 2, a 1, and a nothing. 3 against the willpower of 2. That means 1 point of damage. That sucks, but I have even worse news. The Eudithian is still in range. With 3 points of stamina left, he's going to attack again. We roll those dice. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, they roll well. 4 against 2. That's another point of damage. Finally, with only 1 point of stamina left, the Eudithian is going to move towards the closest explorer, and that was a devastating round. We move into the Thrall's activation, and they have a melee attack that doesn't cause damage, but instead causes a horror event. It's going to spend its first point of stamina to move, and now that it's in range of Hank, it's going to start attacking. The Thrall attacks, and we roll a 3. No horror event here, so we move the marker down, and the Thrall will attack its second time. We roll again, and we roll a 0. Now, if we were playing an easy variant of the game, this 0 would actually mean 0, but all the D&D guys and gals out there know that this is a 10. So that means our second horror event. We draw our next horror event, One-Winged Butterfly. Oof, this is a bad one. When this horror event comes into play, all explorers must unequip their weapons. We unequip, and now we're going to have to perform an inventory action should we wish to attack with those weapons again. With the monsters all done, we move back around to the explorer's activation, and we are not having a good time here. Oh, let's get into things straight away with Kim. We'll begin by spending 3 points of her 6 stamina to make an inventory action. We're going to go ahead and equip her rogue rifle, and then with the remaining 3 points of stamina, we are going to unload that rifle into the Eudithian. The rifle works at range of 4 or under, and we're going to be rolling 3 black dice here. We grab them, give it a roll, We roll a 2, which is actually increased to a 3 because of Kim's special ability. While adjacent to a wall, increase your attack rolls by 1, and we are adjacent to a wall. So that 2 becomes a 3, but it doesn't matter. The Ardithian suffers 1 point of damage, and that is all the health it has. It is defeated. Now, a few things happen here, and I'm actually not sure of the order of operations, so I'll have to look into that. Firstly though, we will do the rogue rifle because this is super beneficial to us. Whenever we make a kill, we can look at the top 2 cards of one item deck and rearrange in any order. We draw the Displacer Vest, which is a nice piece of torso armor, and the Trench Coat, which is also kind of cool. So the Trench Coat gives us 2 extra points of armor. When one hand is unequipped, increase your attack rolls by 1. Well, Kim is rocking a 2-handed weapon, so that one might not be so useful for us. Displacer Vest, when you are hit, move up to 1 space. I'm a big fan of that one, and it even gives a bonus to will and armor. So we're going to place that one on top. And then, guys and gals, the second little bit of action here, for killing the Ardithian, we get to gain an item, and I'm thinking Kim wants that apparel. So we're going to take that Displacer Vest. Oh, you know what? It is a gain item action, so we would in fact draw both the cards, and then we can choose whether or not this one gets discarded. Well, I'm actually liking this one for Hank, so I'm going to keep that back on top of the deck. Cool. Now we're almost done here. We've done all of our post-kill actions, but we have just one more thing to do. Guys and gals, for killing our monster, we gain 1 essence. Now, great use for our gunman characters. Anytime they take an apparel item, they can immediately equip. So the good news is Kim is now just a little bit safer in her Displacer Vest. Alright guys and gals, it is time for Hank versus the Thrall. Now the Thrall has 3 points of armor, so this one might be a tricky one to take down. We'll begin by spending 3 points of stamina to perform an inventory action, and I'm thinking we're going to equip both of these weapons here. We can do this because they are both one-handed weapons, and because our Thrall needs 2 points of damage to take out, we're going to need every bit of weapon we have. For this attack, we're going to spend 2 points of stamina to roll 1 black, 1 white dice, hoping for a good roll here, and we nail it. Kinda. We've only rolled a 2 against the 3 points of armor for the Thrall, but we get to boost our melee attack by 1 point. That 2 becomes a 3, and the Thrall receives 1 point of damage. 1 to go. Now we only have 1 point of stamina left, so I think we try and go all out with the Jagged Carambrit. Yes, we only roll 1 dice, and it's a white one, but if we roll a 2 here, we are in business. 1 stamina, 1 roll. Oh, no good. So we do bump this up to 2, but it's just not enough to finish this roll. Alright guys and gals, so we'll probably call it there just for the review side of things. I'm going to continue this scenario in the next episode. We might try and get through the entire thing, who knows? But for the moment, I think that is enough to sort of give you an idea of what this game is all about. We've only seen a couple of monsters, but already we're having our work cut out for us. Let's head back to the studio for a quick rest, and I'll see you next ep for more gameplay.
Cool, so there we have it. Hopefully that was enough for you guys to kind of see what you're getting yourself into with this game. Let's have a quick chat about what we saw. Beginning, of course, with production. The quality of the game materials here are absolutely fantastic. I'm a huge fan of the double-layered boards, whatever game they come through. Not that I'm, spilling stuff out all over the dock every other game I play. These just feel good and look good to play with. The dice are great, they have some very nice, intricate etchings, and the boards and cards are thick and really nice quality. Artwork obviously is insane here. Definitely the reason I was drawn to the Kickstarter in the first place. Honestly, there is some really scary stuff going on these cards. Definitely right up my alley. Map tiles as well are extremely well detailed, and not for a lack of functionality either. Everything is clear and obvious for gameplay, so that's really good. And still on the art, actually, we have those scenario cards, of which you've only seen a small handful of them for the moment, but they are a wonderful accompaniment to the scenario cards throughout the play. Vivid colours, hellish designs. I am a big fan for sure. Speaking of the scenarios, I'm really digging what I've seen so far. The flavor text is well written, and I'm feeling invited into the world at least. But right now, these, at least for me, are the only point of horror in the game. So let's talk about that for a sec. The game is said to be chilling. The art makes a wonderful point to support it, as does the writing, but I don't believe, at least at this stage, that the gameplay is following suit. And that's kind of a weird thing to say, right? How can gameplay be chilling? And I'm not quite sure. The game Deep Madness, for me, is the hallmark horror out there. Gameplay in that is tense, and situations regularly overwhelm the characters. Real edge of your seat stuff in that game. Here, I've not quite experienced that just yet. Sure, as more monsters hit the table, I could start freaking out, but with a monster limit per tile set at 4, it never really gets there. I always find I have time to prepare, and if I play smartish and find a semi-decent gear loadout, I can cover it. Now, this is fine. I'm actually really digging the gameplay so far, and I'm quite happy to be able to play stress-free. Deep Madness, on the other hand. Rulebook is solid and handles most of the questions that come up, but I did find that while learning, I would go to the book, find the section where the rules should be, and then I'd be directed off to a different chapter for the remainder of the rules. No issues long term, as you become quite familiar quite quickly, but it did frustrate me a little as I was learning. Let's talk about gameplay. Dice chucking adventure games are a dime a dozen, or at least they are in my collection here. So what is it that sets Machina Arcana out from the rest of them? Is it going to be a keeper in the long term? Does it replace anything? Let's discuss, because this one is a really interesting find. It occupies a void in my collection that I didn't know I had. See, complexity is kind of on the light side for me, definitely in terms of what you need to know to play. Sure, as the game progresses, the difficulty increases, but that is more due to what the game throws at you rather than depth of mechanics. It's relatively low luck, enough to be uncertain, but not enough to be swingy. And what's this? The game doesn't take a full fucking table to play. What dungeon crawl, loot-filled adventure game do you know of where you could set up and start playing this thing within 10 minutes of opening the box on a meter by meter table? I can't think of anything this easy. Yes, there's a small amount of deck preparation for monsters, loot, and scenario-specific additions, but it's nothing. There has been nothing like that for me in my collection prior to this. Yeah, it might not have the depth and longevity of a game like Gloomhaven. Sure, the enemy AI is not as interesting and as varied as those in Madara, and I'm certainly not pushed to my limits like Deep Madness, but Machina Arcana is challenging, immersive, and a true adventure game. I want to explore as I play. I want to upgrade my gear. I want to see what happens next in the story. And there is no more that I could ask for in a game like this. Except for maybe reduced playtime. This game is long. For a full scenario, we're talking 2 to 3 hours at least, and as a YouTube playthrough, I'm expecting even longer. Unfortunately, unlike the games previously mentioned, there is no real way to save your progress and pack away in the box. For me, I'll be taking photos of boards state between my episodes, and I'll be putting explorer cards in their own baggies, but the game is just not designed for it, and honestly, I wouldn't recommend it for you either, especially if you want to get the full effect of the narrative, which you do. Alright, enough of me here, let's call it for today. I'm going to continue editing up for the finale of the first chapter, but I also really want to finish a full run through, at least of this scenario, assuming we all survive. Cool. Well, thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed the video, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and do all the things that you guys can do to help this channel grow. But besides that, we are done. So, as always, my name's Michael. This is Bits Aboard. We'll catch you next time.